I'm so into this high self view. I mean, I don't have like a problem with myself. Like I like myself enough, not a lot. No, I'm just kidding. But I don't particularly like care to look at myself. And then the way in which we just all, or I don't know, most of us seem to instinctively look at ourselves when we're speaking, which is so strange. And presumably, like nobody knew that that's what people did. Like before this weird medium we're on, like you didn't have that opportunity to like look at your face as you're talking to other people in real time to know how you would react. And you'd think it would be like, well, you'd look up to make sure you don't look goofy or you don't have egg on your beard. But it's like it's just totally obsessive, and I can't. Why? Is it relieves some of the kind of awkwardness of the Zoom situation to like, oh yeah, I know who that is, or like, no, actually, I am here. I don't know what it is. It's very mysterious. Um, well, greetings all. I could see that like Doug is very intently looking at his screen. I can't tell if he can't get like a sound thing or something because he's like trying to solve a problem, and I feel bad. I want to lean in there and go, we can work it out. So I was thinking of starting off with the sit. It's nice to see folks, but let's talk a little bit maybe about I don't know the framework that's kind of motivating where I'm coming from tonight, um, which is we were just talking about. Greg was just talking about how real physical reality is in a way the weirdest place that we're kind of dealing with now, and how to sort of interact with that vis-a-vis these media worlds that also absorb us, and just the strange feeling of physical reality where there's kind of like a this sort of social energy that's leached away from it. It reminds me, this is kind of a dark example, but I think it's valid. I had a friend who killed himself when I was in high school, and I hung out with him, and he was a little older than me, and he was like kind of like a cooler older brother mentor kind of guy who like had the cool records and was turning me on to stuff and showing playing guitar and make me want to play guitar. So he's kind of in that figure. And I went by his house afterwards and I looked at all his stuff, and it was the same stuff, the same magical, like the record collection in particular was before was this magical source of other worlds and possibilities, and because it was enlivened with our enthusiasm and our relationship and his enthusiasm and his personality, and then I went into this room and it was just dead. Literally, it was just like cardboard and plastic and advertising. It was just nothing. There was nothing in this collection because it's like the material world is animated in all these ways by all these spirits, including our own spirits. And so being in the city is really weird right now because it's like, yeah, it's all the same stuff is there, but it's just not animated. And when I go out even to events. Like I went to a film screening, it was sold out. I saw a lot of people I knew. I had a great time. It was wonderful. But there was a thinness still. There's something kind of elusive about where we're at right now. And I don't know whether, there's a lot of reasons, the COVID, the weirdness of everything, the being unnerved about the physical matrix. But I sometimes also wonder whether we aren't like continuing to unfold into some cybernetic existence. I keep feeling like, okay, now we're kind of arrived at a certain level. Like, yeah, it's developing more, but it's like it's sort of not that different. Oh no, it actually is really different. But it's not as visible as like social media, even though that's part of it. It's something else. Maybe it's something about AI or the way in which we're looped in to the circuits that we feed on and that guide us in so many ways, and where we find ourselves and find others. So I've been thinking about that a lot, and then that's all the cherry on the cake. And in a way, I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, and yet it's kind of interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and admit it, which is that I got an Oculus Quest for a very funny reason. So I'm in a Zen group, right? And my Zen Roshi, who's like 73 years old, is just a character. And he loves science fiction. He's always been into VR. Like he was going to like MIT in the late 80s to check out their early VR gear. He's into Stevenson and whatever. So he's just that kind of guy. He's kind of like a nerd, enthusiastic nerd guy. And so he wants, and he like, when Second Life started, he was like the first Zen guy on Second Life, and they built a whole Zendo, and he would do Zen talks on Second Life. And so he wanted to get on VR and, get, so it was sort of like a Sangha experiment. And I was like, okay, why not? I have a friend who's really into it, has been into it for a while, so I'm going to check it out. And, I put it on and I start doing it, and I had this really weird feeling where the first time I went into it, and like a friend clued me into some really kind of magical games that were particularly fun and playful and imaginative and all that stuff. And the tech is, pretty good. And I had this simultaneous feeling, this simultaneity feeling that I think is almost like symptomatic of where we are in some ways, of like kind of exulting in this new quality of enjoyment and feeling the possibilities, even just with as just a media, like let alone like bigger picture kinds of things or more esoteric mind meld stuff or whatever. But just even on the like, wow, this is just, fun media kind of level, really feeling that. And then simultaneously, deep down, there was this like clear as day, like the robot in Lost in Space, Danger Will Robinson, that said, "This will not go well." I mean, this like visceral sense of the dystopian possibilities, not even possibilities, potentialities of this degree of being sort of translated into information space, control space, surveillance space, modeling space, prediction space, like all these technically mediated spaces that we are already involved in and have to work really hard to decouple from at this point. But it's just like a kind of exuberant, celebration of them. And as someone who's avoided the Facebook universe for my entire life, never got on, never had an account, well, there I am. Well, whatever. And I'm like, whether or not I'm doing that is only so meaningful, but it signified for me in some way. And I think we all have those in different places in our lives where there's something about this moment where the line of development or progress or opportunity is simultaneously this kind of symptom of some deeply unnerving kind of situation. And, I understand people who want to go neo-Luddite and go analog and cut it all off or whatever, but I'm not like that. I don't think I'm going to do that. I think probably we can all sort of agree with that. So my question, my conundrum, my practice question is, well, how do we deal with this? How does practice, help us? And what does even help? What is the help we want? Is it to stay awake? Is it to not fall into habits that themselves are kind of predictive processes, like the way in which practice can be seen as a way of ungrooving yourself in the predictive features of personality, perception, ontology, culture, to actually be able to sort of get out, maybe even just for a moment. Does that help us in this situation? Is it about resistance, and that to try to minimize the degree to which we lose ourselves in these cybernetic loops, and that it gives us a way to kind of reground in the body and the ancient earth and the seasons and the animals, And I hear that too. And you know, I was looking at a mural. I should have taken a photograph of. It was really quite remarkable. It was clearly done officially in San Francisco Park, at Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, at the polo fields, and they have like these underground tunnels, and the outside of the tunnel was painted, and they were all painted freshly, or fresh murals, and they were clearly done like, officially, because they were too nice, and kind of most of them were a little bit, were pretty mainstream, but there was one that wasn't mainstream at all, and it was a very not untypical psychedelic image in which, like, the mushroom, it kind of represents all of this ancient earth energy, like the psilocybin mushroom, and it's like comes out of this sort of ancient shamanic kind of world, and yet what it's actually doing is translating us and preparing us for some kind of, monkey tech mutation, apocalyptic, post-human becoming thing. And it was actually kind of creepy in a, like, a cool way. Like, wow, like you guys got away with like this story, which in a way is a very Bay Area myth, this like center of psychedelic culture that becomes the center of, VR, and then the center of Silicon Valley, and then the center of, creepy AI surveillance, predictive, governmental global control mechanisms. So in a way, it's a very local, if cosmic, story. And the ambivalence that produces in me is I guess part of what I'm talking around now. And I don't have a way. I'm not going to try to pretend. I mean, one thing nice about having a small group of people, most of whom I know now, is that I have even less pressure to like be like somebody who has an answer, and I just gave a talk, like, it was a really cool, it's actually a really worthwhile exhibit. Highly recommended. Now that I say it, it's called Weird Gnosis, and it's done by Impact, which is a Netherlands arts and media studies organization. And I know one of the guys there, they really like high weirdness, and so they're really influenced by it, and they correctly recognize that it's in many ways more of a media studies book than anything. And so they put together and they had, I think, already been working on this, and then like were, kind of brought some of my ideas in. But there's a number of exhibits there. I haven't looked at all of them, but I've looked at a lot, and they're really interesting because they kind of a lot of them resonate with the same feeling that I'm talking about, where it's like you recognize the validity of spiritual experiences. You recognize the power and um, vibrancy of myth, of the imagination, the imaginal, and yet it's sort of bound up, and maybe even more intensely bound up than ever before, with this kind of apocalyptic process that on a political level you're extremely pessimistic about. And anyway, so I was giving a talk, but like I don't know who these people are, and I realized that as I was talking, I felt a kind of nobody was pushing it to me, but I realized that when I'm kind of like more in public, I feel like I not have an answer, but at least I have to have like a suggestion. Like, this is some good stuff to do, or like, we shouldn't get too oppressed by the situation. And right now I'm more just going, what does it mean to like be in that intense ambiguity, or that, and there is a mystery there. There is a not knowing there. And I think and talk a lot about mystery and not knowing, not in some sort of fuzzy sense, although it can be kind of fuzzy, and that's okay. Sometimes I'm fuzzy about it, but really more as like a kind of a radical spiritual and intellectual perspective, where you just affirm like a really fundamental sense of not knowing. And if you're really serious about that, it can be kind of disturbing sometimes, because you want to know, you want to feel, and like and obviously a lot of the time we know how to do this practice, or we can solve this problem because we know how to deal with the problem, or thank God I know how to deal with this. So I'm not saying we should just be like, completely unable to know and to do. That's not really what I mean. But there's something about uh, that our situation is very scary in a lot of ways. That the intensification of polarization in society, the the ramp up of aggressive speech, of militancy, of the sense of like the whole sort of so much of the mediated space is like starting to just really intensify and kind of fracture. And it's, in a way, it's really nice to know where how you relate with it or who you are in it. But there's another level, a kind of a practice level, maybe a psychedelic level, like oh, I took too much and now I just have to to ride it level of really not knowing, of really not knowing. And anyway, so that's a lot of those things are kind of motivating me right now. And so what I just want to sit and nothing too fancy. I've been needing a good sit, just to feel good and feel awake. But I'd be really interested in hearing what people think about this and talking about this from a perspective of of practice, and how to practice with, call them end times if you want. I mean, even if they change and they don't actually end, they sure feel like it in a lot of ways. Um, so so yes, that's my hope, my wish. I did. Turns out I did kind of do a little introduction here, but let's do some sitting. So find your seat. Sit on the floor, turn off the camera, whatever makes you feel tuned in. Yeah, take a big breath, and when you exhale, allow yourself to settle along with the exhale. And as you relax, tune into that posture, find that quality of delicate uprightness alongside the relaxation. The curve in the lower spine, spilling the hips forward, the chest open, shoulder blades back, pouring down the back. Chin ever so slightly tucked in accordance with the top of the head pulling back ever so slightly. For a moment, you can almost feel yourself like a puppet, like a skeleton puppet, and all the different ways you can move as an arrangement of bones. And this one is just this really beautiful balance of relaxation, clarity, and a kind of upright presence in the body. Let's open to the breath throughout the body tonight. Doesn't mean it has to go to every little toe or fingernail, but just allow the sense of breathing as it comes in through the nose or the mouth to fill up the whole body. You can almost probe the subtle sense of having a boundary in your body, not by imagining the surface of your body, which is what we tend to do, but from the inside, feeling this breath filling the body. Well, where is the body? Are there parts that are well defined, other parts that are vague? Breathe into that, and particularly breathe into the vague. So if the inhale sort of reaches out, filling the space of the virtual body, with the exhale, allow it to sort of draw together in the center of the body, in the dantian or the pit of the stomach. Don't have to get too fancy with it, but just a general sense, almost like you're a bellows. And there's that energy at the exhale, at the tip of the bellows, the power. And so you're not intensifying it, but simply using your attention to sort of focus that exhale in the center of the body. So you're kind of like moving out and in, out and in. And allow it to be gentle and diffuse. So let's do that for a short spell. Gently attend to the sense of the boundary of your body. If you think about it too much, it'll just redraw itself along familiar lines. So instead, you're kind of sneaking up on it or allowing it to grow vague, to melt a bit. Right now, I'm very aware of my left foot, which is curled up beneath my leg, but my chest is kind of diffuse. I'm not really sure where it is. Notice if there's an unsettled feeling around that dissolution or that vagueness, and try to resist clarifying it, or at least allow that urge to clarify to itself dissolve. You might find that you're sort of naturally oscillating between this dissolving boundaryless boundary and the warmth and gentle concentration of the exhale. Or just rest where you are. See if you can grow comfortable with the vagueness. Draw your mind to a point in your body where you're really quite aware of the boundary. Like you can feel your elbow on the edge of the chair, something very concrete. Try to get inside the feeling. Don't think about it. Don't model your body in space, or at least allow those images to dissolve, and in their place, feel the sensation from the inside. Intimately, with subtlety, like you're running your fingers along a very fine piece of fabric. The texture of this boundary from the inside. How does it change? Often these points that are clearly defined are so because they are resting right on something else, like a pillow, an armrest. But from that inside feeling, try to see is there anything out there? Isn't it all just inside? The feeling? Maybe inside, outside don't quite apply, at least for a moment. No problem if your normal sense of your body keeps coming up. Like, I'm just sitting here, I got my elbow, I got the armrest. What is he talking about? It's great because if you can get inside the feeling, really become intimate with that flavor of sensation, of presence, of vibration that feeling is, you may notice the difference between that and your conventional sense of a body in space, a well-bounded body in space. And so if you find yourself in that typical view again, see if you can taste that too. What does that feel like? It's not a problem. It's not a failing, but it's not all there is. So let's just sit a bit with one of these boundary points and see if that sense of inside and out, of the edge of your skin bag, can grow softer, more malleable, more diffuse. There's something animating these feelings. We can call it energy. Nobody really knows what energy is in terms of the spiritual body, meditative body. And that mystery, that vibration is inside the feeling. It's inside all the feelings. It's there all the time. So we have these different points, part of the body that's well defined, maybe now feeling a bit diffuse. We can be in touch with the core, the dantian, at the exhale, that sense of sort of warm vibrancy in the center of the body, and maybe more diffuse areas that aren't so well defined. What is the feeling that is shared by all of these? What is animating them equally? One time, one place. To get inside these feelings isn't just like putting your hand in a glove and then feeling the world through the glove. It's also a kind of tuning inside, like what's riding on top of the coarser sensations. There's something else there, like an overtone in someone's voice. If that doesn't make sense, no big deal. But just sit with the field of feeling. Breath, body, boundary, the feeling running through all of it. Allow yourself to gently check out your sensorium now. Is there anything interesting, enigmatic in your hearing or the visual field? Are there any signatures of this sense of subtle energy? Twitches, warmth, pleasure. and anxiety. Now, again, staying as sort of subtle as possible, try to draw that energy more uh, firmly into the dantian. Again, we're talking about a point that's a couple inches, a couple of fingers below the belly button, a couple of inches inside the body. And again, you might notice your mind sort of getting a map of the body and putting something somewhere, or there's an image of a chakra or something like that. As much as possible, that's fine. Be aware of that. But again, from that being inside feeling, add a little bit of directionality, a little bit of like you're like you're making a snowball out of loose snow. You kind of gotta not pack it hard, but you gotta sort of put a little pressure around it, just a tad. Don't get too intense with it, but see if you can reorient the sense of this energetic field by giving it a focus in your body. And just for fun, if you're not already doing it, as slightly as you can, and then watch the effects. As slightly as you can, uh, tuck up on your perineum or your anus, just very lightly, and see if you notice any energetic effects. This slight tension coupled with breath is a remarkable instrument and almost a joystick of navigation, which can be employed in a variety of altered states. Once we've tuned into the energy like this and sort of located in the body, there's all sorts of things you can do. Microcosmic orbit, move through the chakras, and these all involve some combination of sort of imagination, tension, will, and that's Great stuff. But right now, I'm a little more interested in just what does it want to do? And that answer might be different for everybody. Maybe you still just want to stay with this energetic focus or um, intensify it or feel it more directly. But see if you can follow it. And if it's not clear, that's fine because you're what I'm asking for is in part an attitude of um, opening receptivity to the energy in you, almost as if it is a guest. So let's just do that for a few minutes. If you're not feeling anything uh, obvious or direct, you may try to say subtly reposition yourself, re iterate your form, tuck in the chin, pull out the chest, these slight movements, and then see if there's a sort of energetic trace or resonance in these very slight shifts or with the breath. It's a playground. If it gets a bit much, you can always use your breath or allow your breath to sort of round out the spikiness of the energy, kind of smoothing it, soothing it. And now, as we turn towards the close, just allow that all to drop away. Don't do anything with it. Don't track it, taste it. Instead, allow the mind to do what it will, riding the horse. There is an intelligence in the energy, and in some ways, you are that intelligence. So just rest in that open field for the last moment or two. All right, everyone. Thanks for going on that journey with me. This time I really didn't know where we were going to go. I thought we were going to go somewhere else, which is kind of fun. Um,
And we did.
we did. We did. Yeah, there's something about that open-ended energy work where, I mean, I guess it's, you can call it samadhi, uh, that is, I don't know, I like approaching in this kind of playful way where there's still some dynamics in there. And I don't know what that's about exactly or why I encourage that. I mean, I do that. Um, I guess it's the sense that, again, I think I've mentioned this before, that whatever practice you're doing and whatever system and whatever things you're doing, it's like there's always room for not just playfulness, but I think a sense of exploration. I mean, that's kind of what the Dharmanaut, the knot in the Dharmanaut is. And, I mean, I guess it's all sort of exploration, everything you're doing, any meditation retreat, but almost more on a micro level. You're always there, sort of probing, investigating, encountering, questioning, inquiring. It's sort of like, I love the phrase inquiry, and that's sort of one of my core um, figures for living life because obviously there's a sort of intellectual dimension to it, but it's one that emphasizes the questions more than the answers. But it's not just intellectual, it's almost more like an attitude towards reality and towards what comes, and also towards meditation experiences. And uh, sometimes I feel like, maybe I'm in if I had been like sticking with the plan for 20 years, that I'd be enlightened or something like that, whatever that means. Um, but I find that this kind of approach really works well with throughout your life, if I can keep out of my head, I'm doing pretty good because of this stuff. If I can keep tied in with the things and people and animals and um, art objects and feelings around, it's pretty good. I'm not exactly sure what this has to do with the earlier question about technology and where we're going, because I do want to get back to that. So I'll just maybe riff on it a little bit and then open it up for Q&A. But I'll riff a little bit more. Um, I used to think, I think, that these these energetic practices were valuable in a kind of um, hyper mediated information space for a couple reasons. One, um, that the kind of work we were doing, samadhi work, uh, if it's more specifically focused, things that lead to jhana, are have a lot to do with pleasure or with feeling and sensation and aesthetics. And um, to me, there's something very grounding, uh, not in necessarily like a physical sense, but a kind of psychic sense, grounding and uh, freeing about being able to generate wonderful experiences on in yourself, meaning you don't need it from anything else. I can do this on a park bench waiting for a bus at 10:30 a.m. The guy next to me is, smells like booze and he's smoking or whatever, and it's kind of annoying, but it doesn't matter because I can actually do something like this. Not all the time, but if the stars are right. And there's something about that, not autonomy, uh, autopoiesis, something about that self-making that I really believe allows us to not get as trapped or caught up in all of the ways that we are distracted and plugged into other mediated attention streams to a degree. Uh, and it also just felt like it's so embodied in a certain way. It's so much about the body, these senses of energy, that it was a grounding thing in relationship to what often seemed to be a very heady kind of technological realm where you're processing signs. It's so visually oriented, maybe audio oriented too, so much about information and pattern. And here you were able to kind of go down into the inky depths and start to really feel the kind of energetic flows and fluxes. But that's all up for grabs as well. Like that's all part of the mediated the technium. All these interior feelings are themselves sort of part of the circulation, or I think increasingly will be. And in a way, that's already the case in the sense of like if you look at uh, like an EDM festival, like a Psytrance festival, circa 1995, where people are following electronic beats with their psychedelic bodies. They're entering into ecstasy. They are entrained so that the beats are like running through their bodies, running through their minds, running through their interconnections. And you get this like super intense, powerful kind of ecstatic um, rhythm that's inside and out, that's very energetic, that manifests itself in all these subtle ways, sort of stimulated by the music and echoed by the music. And that's great. That's great. But there's a kind of this question about how we maintain our own energetic consistency and balance in the midst of a situation where more and more things will be like that. So like again, like I'm looking at the Oculus and I'm like, doing the some of the workout stuff because it's actually a really great way to work out, and which is kind of a funny paradox that cyberspace to me so far is most interesting and that I work out and it's more fun. But dipping in just a little bit to some of the meditation spaces and the kind of like sort of psychedelic wellness kind of stuff, and I'm like, holy moly, here we go, kids. Because here's this thing that I've been paying attention to the psychedelic space for so long, and this one I didn't quite get till recently. A friend of mine, Tassin Noorani, had to knock it into me, where the effort to scale psychedelic healing, big numbers, will rapidly run into the bottleneck of therapy hours. There aren't enough therapists. You cannot pay enough therapists for enough hours to be able to pull this off at scale. So, what is going to take the place of the therapist? The app. So, you're looking at a future where psychedelic naives, and might not happen this way. Who knows? Maybe we get a reactionary, totalitarian, quasi-Christian nightmare here in the United States of America, and they put the kibosh on all this stuff. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think some version of this will go down, and people in the place of the organic subcultures that many of us grew up with, or the highly trained, highly thoughtful realms of underground therapists, or particular mystical paths or meditative techniques or yoga. You have people who are just trying to make themselves feel better and looping their own psychedelic transformations that involve energy and image and uh, ecstasy and difficult feelings, resonances, and then sort of having that, the space of the mediation and the integration and the intention and all of that being highly mediated by these mechanisms that we already recognize are deeply invested in prediction, in modeling, in extraction, extracting ever more refined models of who we are. And we may not really be able to stop that process. I mean, there's a certain point where you go, look, man, we're already cruising down the AI road, and we can, the political sides of us should absolutely be asking, well, who's making the money and how we can point this in a better direction. But there are definitely things that are, you know, feedback loops are upon us, and uh, amplification of cybernetic processes infused with capital. It's the range of movement seems sometimes rather limited. And so is the question, how do we keep what is best about human beings, human minds, connection, love, art, alive in a situation that could be pretty dystopian and not that far away? And I'm not talking about climate change, I'm not talking about social breakdown, all these other things, which are also, of course, in the picture. I'm really trying to get a sense of, I just, you know, I'm really offering up my own confusion, my sense that something really significant is happening on these subtler levels of consciousness, of spirit, of how we guide our minds and attentions and consciousness through the minutia of our everyday, but particularly an everyday that's transforming according to these increasingly technological uh, and logics, machine learning, and so. But that's my big ambiguous question. It's 7 o'clock. Let's stop the recording and, let's talk.